Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our final webinar of the year. The topic for tonight will be what comes next, jobs after graduate school. And we have two prior Student Circle board members who are early career professionals and are going to share with us their wisdom on how they got their jobs. And so today we have with us Dr. Jasmine Tilghman, or Dr. Jazz, and also Dr. Gabrielle Smith. And how this will go is I'm going to ask them a series of questions. Each of them will respond. But really, we want this to be interactive. And any questions that you all have in the audience, feel free to put them in the chat. And at the end, we will have both presenters answer those questions from the audience. All right. So to get us started, Dr. Smith, will you tell us a little bit about your current position? Just do a brief background.
So some background information about myself. I am an experimental psychologist, social specifically, and I'm interested in identity as it relates to health and educational outcomes, focusing specifically on women and African Americans. But I am also interested in the other identities that intersect with that. I am a graduate of Spelman College and the University of Alabama, Roll Tide. But when we talk about my current position, it gets a little bit tricky. So technically, I am currently an assistant professor of psychology at Tougaloo College, a small HBCU right outside of Jackson. Visiting at Brown right now for the summer, and then going to Texas Women's University in the fall as an assistant professor as well. So if that makes sense. So I'm currently in transition between these three different positions.
Awesome, thank you. And Dr. Jazz, will you tell us a little bit about your current position?
Yes, so I am a senior staff psychologist at the University of California, Irvine. And some people ask where Irvine is, and it's in Orange County. It's Southern California, and it's about an hour south of LA and an hour north of San Diego. But I am in my first year, wrapping up my first year at this university. Prior to that, I was a postdoctoral fellow at the University of California, San Diego. And then I completed my degree at University of Missouri, Columbia. And in my position, I am full-time, and I see undergraduates, graduate students, and also professional students. I do individual, couples, group therapies, and I also do outreach across campus. So going to student organizations or classes, or even faculty, and giving presentations related to some psychological issue or concern. And then that's pretty much all I do.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. So we'll just hop right into questions. The first one is, what led you into your current position? What led you into this field? What got you interested in it? So we'll just start with Dr. Smith.
Okay, so I've always loved teaching, or the thought of teaching. So even before pursuing education or graduating high school, so as a kid, I would, teach my teddy bears and have that captive audience. But while I was at Spelman, I wanted to teach high school, and I was pushed towards going to pursue a Ph.D. in psychology. And the first class that I taught was as a graduate student. I taught Introduction to Psychology and fell completely in love with it. Love teaching and mentoring and all of those types of things. And so that's what got me interested in teaching. I always wanted to do it. And in terms of psychology, when I first took intro, I hated it. It was a year at Spelman, and so the whole first semester I thought it was horrible. But then we got to social psych, and and so for the part that focused on things like social influence and groupthink, and why people who are otherwise considered normal can do abnormal things or engage in abnormal thinking processes, or be persuaded to do things outside of their character in certain types of social situations. And so that's what really led me to decide to become a social psychologist. And here I am.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. How about you, Dr. Jazz?
So I have like funny reasons why I wanted to go into psychology, and then some personal ones. But sometime in the 4th grade, I saw this random movie. I couldn't tell you what it was called, but all I knew is that I saw a psychologist as a character, and she had on this like pencil skirt and like this like kind of blousey white button down long sleeve, and then her hair was pulled back in a bun with some glasses, and I was like, she looks really nice. Like I would like I would like to have that profession. So that was in the 4th grade, and then the 11th grade in high school, I took my first psychology class, and another silly reason, we were talking about circadian rhythms, and my teacher said, okay, tomorrow we're going to come in and all we're going to do is sleep. And I was like, I can get used to this field. And so I wanted to go into psychology in undergrad, and that's what I did. The more I learned about it and the more classes that I took, and how it related to my own like experiences, or at least trying to better understand my experiences and why I am the way I am and why other people are the way they are, I really felt like it was what I was supposed to be doing. And I also have been always told that I've been like a good listener. People always tend to come and just talk to me about all types of stuff. And I've, just listened and kind of been like that shoulder for people to lean on or cry on or laugh on. And so I just feel like there's so much that we could do in this field. And I like being able to be in a helping profession. I feel like that's just kind of part of my personality. And I also feel like psychology is broad. There's, so many facets and contexts where you can apply psychology. And so it's just kind of like, as a counseling psychologist, I don't necessarily feel like I have to stay in one niche. There's so many that I could be a part of and grow and learn. And it's just kind of one of those fields where it changes with the times and stays. It's just, you just can't ever get bored with psychology. So that's why.
Awesome, thank you. And Dr. Smith, did you want to talk a little bit about what led you or what got you interested in the topics that you study?
Okay, so one of the things that I do a lot of research on is stereotype threat. And so for me, one of the things that led me to be interested in that was to the idea, or hearing a lot of my students as a graduate student when I first started teaching, talking about their apprehension about things like the GRE or the MCAT or the LSAT. And also, of course, we all know the statistics about who does well on those types of tests. And so that's what really got me started with pursuing the area of stereotype threat. Then I'm also really interested in how social identities intersect with each other and how that can predict a lot of different outcomes, or how we approach different situations, or how we interpret the things that are going on around us in our social environment. And so those types of things led me to study the things that I do study. And I am just really interested in things that are impacting the people around me. And so I think that's really why I am a social psychologist, because of the social interactions that interest me on a day-to-day basis are the things that I go back and study. So if that gives you a little bit more insight.
Thank you. And Dr. Jazz, did you want to talk a little bit about your area of interest? I know your dissertation was on hardiness. I don't know if you want to talk about that, or if there's any other areas that you've gone into in your new position.
Mm-hmm. So yes, my area of research when I was in graduate school was hardiness and race-related stress. And I found myself delving into those topics. It started off with just race-related stress. Once I learned about it and the definition of it, I just felt like really connected to it. And similar to Dr. Smith, just feeling like, you know, research is me search sometimes. And so I just felt connected to it because of my own experiences. And I also realized it was an experience of a lot of people around me, particularly African Americans, Blacks. So then once I realized that it is a stressor, constant, daily, nonstop, I was interested in, you know, just how people deal with it and cope with it. And so hardiness is a concept that is similar to a protective factor and a buffer against stress-related illnesses, but it had never been talked about or studied in the context of race-related stress. And so I thought that that would be a good two, you know, variables to study when it comes to my dissertation, especially because of race-related stress and the negative impacts it has on African Americans and Blacks. So hardiness, I just fell in love with as well, and I felt like it was part of who I am. And once I learned that it was something that was a trait or a state, and it's something that could be taught to people, then I loved it even more. So I was really glad that I chose those two variables to study, and I was able to apply them to everyday life, but also be able to share that with mentees or mentors, peers, colleagues. Recently, I was able to give a CE presentation to the psychology interns here. And so I just feel very fortunate to be able to have studied those two variables. And probably since graduating, I have developed a strong interest in working with entertainers, and currently trying to develop a new division of APA called Entertainment Psychology, because it is an underserved population, and the creative population goes through a lot of different things that no one really knows and talks about. And because I also identify as a singer-songwriter, that is really, really important to me to be able to give back to that community and do research in that community. So I would say those three things are what I consider my areas of interest.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Smith, can you talk a little bit about what led you to pursue your position at either your current institution or the institution you're switching to, whatever, or both, whatever you would like to talk about. But specific to the institution, what made you want to apply to those institutions?
Okay, so while being a student at Spelman, I noticed a lot of things that were available to me that as a first generation college student, I really appreciated, and I wanted to be that for other people. And so that's what led me to pursue positions at institutions that served underrepresented populations. So both Tougaloo and TWU service students who are mostly first generation college students, or have a high need for financial aid, or are not the traditional student for one reason or another. And so being the mentor for other people that I received while pursuing my education at Spelman was something that was really motivating for me. And both of these institutions do provide that, you know, that avenue for me to be able to be that mentor for these individuals. And I think in terms of the transition, which is something that's really important, make sure that you are aware of what you want, and when things are no longer appealing to whatever your desires are, being comfortable with pursuing other avenues, because people will make you feel as though you're really a part of the environment, and so you may feel a little bit guilty transitioning. But I think for me, I knew it was best because I am also a researcher. In the current environment, I couldn't do the research that I needed to do to pursue the career that I wanted. And so that's what prompted me to apply for a different position.
Thank you. And Dr. Jazz, what led you to pursue your position at UC Irvine?
Well, so I have wanted to work at UC Irvine since my psychology internship year, which was 2014. And I didn't get it. And so then I tried to go there for my postdoc, but I didn't get it. So I was persistent and applied right out of postdoc. And third time's a charm. But specifically, UCI is one of the only counseling centers in the nation that has predominantly counseling psychologists on staff. And for me, that's really important, just considering the education, training, and background that overlap and are similar. The other thing is that UCI is also known for social justice and advocacy for its students. And that's something that's really important to me as well. I just felt like this is a counseling center that I would be around like-minded individuals and really enjoy the people that I work with, and also be able to have those difficult, tough conversations that I want to be having. And to me, with regard to choosing a counseling center over some other setting, it really was just kind of worked out that way. All of my training, clinical training, has been in a counseling center and not necessarily in like a hospital or a community center or anything like that. It's just all been counseling centers. And so I just knew that that's where I was going to apply to. So it worked out to where I was able to get the job here right after postdoc.
Hi, my name is Gabrielle. I'm a Christian. I'm the secretary for the Student Circle of ABSI, and I'm going to kind of take over a couple of the questions for both of you. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. My first question is, what type of qualifications do you feel like you both had for your careers, and specifically what tips would you have for students who would want to be in similar positions? What type of qualifications should they kind of work on obtaining now?
So for my position, being a staff psychologist, so there's, other types of positions in a counseling center. Doesn't have, everyone that works there is not necessarily a staff psychologist, but for a staff psychologist, the qualifications include having a Ph.D. in psychology of some field related to counseling, but it doesn't have to be counseling psychology. And you'd also have to, in the state of California, get licensed as a psychologist prior to working here. There are other states where you could probably get hired on and then you can get licensed later. But in order to be called a psychologist, you have to get licensed. So that would require national exams, state exams that have to be passed, and then you'd be certified psychologist. Also, in my counseling center, a lot of qualifications also include experience in a counseling center, just because it's done differently than other settings, and so it's good to have some experience in a counseling center, whether that be 1 to 2 years. It really just depends on what you are able to absorb and what you're able to apply to the current position. And depending on the center's job description, they may be looking for people who may specialize in students who are working with, say, eating disorders. Clinicians who are working in eating disorder area, autism area, substance use. So, sometimes there are jobs that are posted, but you really want to pay attention to what they are looking for in their applicants. And then some counseling centers are also looking for generalists. A lot of them are, because you work with all types of students, and they want their employees to be well versed in a lot of different things. So for the most part, I think that education, you have to get the degrees, you have to get licensed. Those are the biggest qualifications that you need, but also experience in the setting that you want to be working. And I would just add, like, as far as tips, I would, make sure that you stand out in some way, like whether you have a special interest area that's a little different or unique in addition to being a generalist. Or if, for example, you did have experience in eating disorders or substance use, maybe you have experience in both, you know, so it's just kind of like, how could they say no if you have experience in a lot of different things that they're looking for?
Dr. Smith, I believe you might be muted still.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So while being a graduate student, I did teach a lot, which, I mean, in order to be a professor, you have to be well versed in teaching. But I also did things in service of becoming a better professor and researcher, because as a faculty member, you are expected to engage in research as well. And so I applied for and received the SREB Southern Regional Educational Board Fellowship, which is teaching centered, and they provide a lot of mentorship and guidance in how to be an effective professor. And I also created a class, pitched it to my department, and was able to teach the class at the University of Alabama, as well as Birmingham Southern College, which was a local liberal arts school, because I did anticipate being in a liberal arts environment. And so I wanted to have that experience of not only being at a larger institution such as the University of Alabama, but also a smaller one, to show that I knew how to move in different types of environments, classroom demographics. And I also engaged in a lot of initiatives outside of the classroom, because as a professor, your job isn't just to show up and teach the students. You're a really big part of the campus community. And so I served on a lot of different organizations around campus. I also was a liaison for the Department of Psychology between the students and the faculty members. So I got a firsthand experience and training on how the behind the scenes of campus life works outside of the classroom. And so that was very beneficial. And I saw that on interviews, individuals who I would talk to about those experiences really appreciated that and thought that that would be something that would service me well. I also did a lot of training in terms of grant writing, and also making sure that I was diverse. So if I did decide to do a career change, which now I'm doing, I could leave the small liberal arts environment and transition easily, and not have to defend or oversell myself, because my CV spoke for itself in terms of the research that I had as experience as a graduate student. And so even though teaching was my passion and teaching was at the forefront, I still had the research behind me, in case I did decide to pursue a more research-oriented career, which is what I'm doing now.
Great. Dr. Smith, we have a follow-up question about your position as a visiting professor. Could you kind of tell us a little bit about that and like what it entails?
Okay, so this summer I am teaching the psychology and the media at Brown for one of their summer programs. And really, what it is for me, an opportunity to get a taste of the Ivy League without actually being in the Ivy League. And I did it last summer as well. And so these little opportunities will come up. And for me, I'm really big on that, seizing the opportunities that are presented to you and being aware of things that are going on around you. And so Brown has an exchange program with Tougaloo, where they allow faculty and students to go back and forth and do different things and have all of the rights and privileges of faculty or students at the other institution. But most faculty don't take advantage of it at Tougaloo, but I have been. And they also have one with Smith and other institutions. And so as a professor, being cognizant of all of the things around you, whether they're from organizations like ABSI, what they may have, or APA, or looking at your faculty handbook to see, because this program was kind of buried in the faculty handbook as an option. And so just being aware of the things that are available to you and taking advantage of them and pursuing those things. And I think that's something that I've done throughout my entire career, and it has always benefited me greatly, because the worst that can happen is someone can tell you no, and then you move on to the next opportunity. And that's the mantra that I live by. Just tell me no and someone else will tell me yes. So.
Great, thank you. Our next question is about the application process and the interview process. What do those look like for both of you?
Okay, so for me, the application process, of course, your CV and different institutions will request different things. So you want to make sure that you have all of these documents that may be called upon you to offer ready. So things like a research statement if you're applying for a research center job, teaching statement, your CV, your personal statement, but you need different versions of those things for an academic. So you have to be aware of the culture of the institution that you're applying for. So applying for a liberal arts school, or in a small one at that, you would have all of those things, but your research statement needs to be very centered on, I will include students in my research, or how your research will service the educational environment of the students at that institution. Whereas if you're applying to a more research-centered institution, then even your teaching statement should have elements where you're still talking about research, and your research statement is really just, mostly your research statement. And so you have to, I really had like 4 different versions of each of these things. And your mentors will be very helpful in that, and contacting people who have left your programs recently to get access to their materials was also really helpful for me. For me, most of the institutions that I go on interviews with, I have to do a job talk where I'm talking about my research program, and also a teaching talk, which is my favorite because I always kill it. No, so making sure that you know what teaching, what things that you are really, really good at teaching and have the most impact or the most positive response from typical audiences, and making sure that you always have that in your arsenal to pull out, or making sure that you have that down pat, as well as your research talk. And sometimes they will request for you to do a talk on something very particular. So if you're, like one of the interviews I just went on, they wanted me to do a global health disparities talk, a class that I've never taught before, but also being prepared for that. And so as early as possible, making sure that you get the information on what you're going to be required to do, and if it is very particular, or if you have the freedom to choose what you want to teach as well. Because I did find out a week before for one of the interviews I did that I had to do something that I never taught before. So making sure that you have that knowledge.
So for me, the clinical side, it does on the institution that you're applying to, but I would say that I'll use UCI as an example, because I have heard that it's could be considered one of the more extensive interviews processes that you could go through compared to other college counseling centers. So there is, definitely a CV. Depending on what they are looking for, you definitely want to emphasize your CV in that area so that they can definitely see the experiences there. And then there is a personal statement, and typically etiquette is like 2 pages, single space. If you go over that a little bit, then that's fine, but try not to have like a 5-page single-space personal statement. That's just going to be overwhelming for reviewers. And then there's also the application that is through the university, like through the human resources department. Those questions are sometimes standard for every person who applies to that university, and then the department also adds their specific questions that are pertinent to working in that department. So there was 3 aspects to my application. And then after that, maybe a couple days later, I received a phone call from the counseling center asking for a phone interview out of 2 interviews. So then if I were to get past a phone interview, then I'd be invited to an on-campus all-day interview. So we had the phone interview. It was questions pertinent to the position, you know, what would I do in certain situations. That was about 45 minutes to an hour. And something else to remember is with any interview, make sure you are as concise as possible in your responses so that 1, they are able to get through all the questions they have for you, and 2, there's some time for you to ask questions at the end. Thankfully, I got through that phone interview and scheduled an on-campus interview about 3 weeks later. And that was all day, like they said. It was from 8:30 to 4. So I was nervous about that, just, you know, nervous about having the stamina to be able to interview all day. Didn't know what I was going to get myself into, didn't know what I had to do or prepare. But I was able to learn a little bit more about what it would look like about, you know, a couple days before I had to do it. So I did have to prepare a case presentation, and what that means is I had to, you know, take a client that I have currently or in the past, and I had to get rid of all the identifying information and develop like about a 30-minute presentation talking about, you know, why they came in, what their goals were, what I did to work with them, what their diagnosis was, any type of risky factors, suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, any of that type of stuff, and what their, you know, paperwork scores were compared to when they came in versus when they were done, and what type of outcomes. So that was kind of like a brief version of a case presentation. And then I also had to do an outreach presentation. So they wanted to get a feel for how do I present to students on topics that are relevant to college population. So I actually decided to make an outreach presentation on race-related stress and hardiness because I felt like it was very relevant. And if anything, if you don't identify with race-related stress, you can identify with hardiness. So those are 2 presentations I had to be prepared to present to the campus and to staff here. So that's very nerve-wracking, but it makes sense because it's the position that we're in. They want to get a feel for my clinical style because I'm going to be on my own, and they want to get a feel for how I am going across campus. The other parts of the interview included an interview with just the management team, interview with the search committee, interview with interns, psychology interns. I also had lunch with a staff member, but a student was present. So they are able to involve students in the hiring process of psychologists here because student fees pay for our positions. And so they want students involved as much as possible. And then I had a one-on-one meeting with the director. I could be missing something as far as all that happened that day, but that is definitely what I can remember at this time.
Great, thank you. So kind of going off of that same question, we're curious about what recommendations you may have based on your own experience or the experience of others in your positions when it comes to negotiation and discussion of contracts and salary and things like that. So what type of suggestions would you guys have?
I would definitely talk to any type of mentors or people that you know that are in the positions that you are applying for, because otherwise it's really hard to know where to even start when it comes to negotiating a contract and salary. So for me, I knew about 2 people at this center. So I called them immediately and asked them what they did and how it went, or what direction I should take, what words should I use, all of that, things to consider. And it was so helpful because they were saying things that like I didn't even think about. So it would really depend on what setting you want to go into, where you want to work. And so I just feel like that's the best advice I could give is if you know someone, either a mentor or a friend or a family in the position that you are seeking, then I would talk to them. I would not be afraid of, whatever salary they offer you going like, 5 to 10 higher. There's nothing wrong with just asking. So, closed mouths don't get fed is kind of the motto that I live by. So definitely just ask. You may or may not get that approved, but getting comfortable with just asking is the first step. So that's what I would highly recommend. And the other thing is maybe knowing a little bit more about what it is you may need to be successful at your position. And if they're not flat out offering that to you or saying that that is a part of your experience, then that's whenever you'd want to ask them and negotiate with them that those things or that thing is very, very important for you to be successful. And any place that wants you bad enough wants you to be successful as well. And so they're going to probably do everything that they can to try and make that come to fruition.
Okay, and I would add to make sure that you do your research, because especially if you're going for a job at a place that has publicly available salaries and things of that nature, and so you can do a comparison also of taking into account, positions, similar positions in other organizations, as well as your personal experience and what you will bring to the table. And then for people who are applying for faculty types of positions, you would also want to make sure that you are asking for the equipment that you need to do the research that you want to do and do it well. And so for me, I always request, in a perfect world, this is all of the things that I would want in my lab. And again, the most they can tell you is no. Or in the perfect world, this is the salary that I would want. And then you negotiate back and forth to what they're willing to do. And often you will be surprised, I've been surprised. They are usually willing to accommodate those types of requests that you have. And my ultimate rule is, you should always get things like moving expenses and all of those types of things. Always request the things that you think you will need, and don't hesitate, because these are things that they do often. And so it may be uncomfortable for you the first few times that you do it, because this is going to be a new experience, but they're well versed in it and they expect it as well. So don't feel uncomfortable requesting the things that you desire to be comfortable in the position that you're being offered. But everything else that Jazz said was spot on. Dr. Jazz.
Thank you. So as a follow-up question for Dr. Smith, how do you determine those things that you might need to run a successful lab?
Can you hear me, Dr. Smith? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Dr. Smith, are you able to hear us? I'm not certain if she might be able to.
You heard my response, right?
We can't hear you.
I can't hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
She can't hear us.
Okay. We'll work on fixing that. And
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Can you not hear me?
We can hear you now. Are you able to hear us?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's the bulk of it that I would say, is to make sure that you request what you're worth. I don't know if you heard everything.
Yeah, we did.
I can't hear anything. Oh, okay. Thank you for typing it in for me. So you have to take evaluation of your research, both current research that you're pursuing as well as any future research that you will be interested in. And so I talked a lot about my past research that I've done on social identity, but I did not speak about some new research initiatives that I'm interested in the pursuit of obesity health disparities. So recently I became an NIH OHD fellow, obesity health disparities fellow. And so I'm taking a new venture into some research on obesity. And so for that, I need a lot of different things that I didn't need previously. And so getting things to measure weight and height and things of that nature for individuals who may not be able to use the traditional scales, as well as for me as a social psychologist, always trying to figure out things like the social dynamics around food. So I requested items to make a fake food buffet, something that I can reuse over and over again, to do some pretty cool things that I won't talk about here because it'll take all day and I'll get way too excited and you guys will all hang up. But we talk about those types of things that you would need to be successful, and the things that you said in your interview that you would want to do, as well as things for yourself and your research assistants to be productive. So you have to, of course, do your research, see what the institution already offers. So most likely they'll already have things like SPSS, but they may not have STATA if you need it, or things of that nature. So making sure that you have the software you need, whatever you want your research assistants to have, as well as anything that you can think of, I would ask for. And then you can also call upon your mentors. I definitely called my major professor from graduate school and talked to her about some of the items that I should be putting on that list. And I think I saw another question pop up.
Yeah, so we have a question from the audience about, as a young early career professional, do you experience ageism? And if so, how do you respond?
Something about age. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So in terms of age, the lamp in the visiting professor office, professor housing is broken, so I don't know if you can see, but I look kind of young. And so I really don't get any pushback about my age from students, but I do have some interesting interactions with fellow faculty or colleagues that I encounter at conferences. And for me, I don't think I'm going to magically look my age or older anytime soon. And so one of the ways that I tend to combat it is, just let my work and my knowledge speak for itself. So it doesn't matter how old I look or how old I am, I am Dr. Smith, all intents and purposes. I do have all of this research behind me, all of this research ahead of me, and all of these things that I am knowledgeable about that, speak for what I offer, and my age doesn't really, have anything to do with it. And sometimes you have to check people in a respectable manner, but still, so that has happened before, but not as often as people tend to think based off of what my age is and what my age looks like it is.
Dr. Jazz, would you like to answer that as well?
Sure. So yeah, I like Dr. Smith. I have a baby face, but I'm not mad at it. And at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily say I get negativity because of my age and being an early career professional. I just get a lot of like, really, like, you have your PhD? That's what I get. Or I would say, yes, I'm a doctor, and they're like, a doctor in being 12. I'm like, so I get like comments like that. But at work, I just psychologist, and I also like prefer Dr. Jazz, and I think that is one, helping me to not only connect with the students, but it just, for me, is like my sense of confidence. I just feel like if I'm able to determine what I want to be called, I just think that people respond well to that and get a sense of the confidence. And that confidence can really make you come off as older than you look. So, and I also feel like the people that I work with respect everything that I say. When I open my mouth, people are listening to me. No one is talking over me. And there are some people who come to me and ask me for tips or advice or consult, vice versa. So I definitely don't get a feel that my age or being new here is affecting the connections and the professionalism of the people that I work with. Outside of here, all the time, every day, people are, thinking I'm a student here. I can't really help that, and I'm not mad at it. I just say thank you, and I correct them. But whenever I do talk about my position and to other people and that I have a PhD, they are just always shocked. But I can't do anything about this space. Like, I can't. So.
Thank you. The next question we have is, what kind of challenges do people of color face in your fields, or if there are any challenges, and how you would suggest someone overcome those challenges? Dr. Jazz, can you answer first, please?
Sure. I would say that people of color face challenges in general, so therefore there are going to be challenges anywhere you work. It doesn't matter. It's going to be there, whether intentional or not. I would say that the difference in where I work is that because I'm surrounded by so many counseling psychologists, it is a topic that we discuss. It is a topic that we are not afraid to confront each other with and have, like healthy dialogues about that topic. I don't think that it is anything that I experience all the time here because I work with so many people who are aware and, are social advocates, have multicultural training, are able to, interact with people that are different from them. So I just feel like it happens less here, but it does happen because it just will. Everywhere you go, you're not going to get rid of it. I think that's because I'm able to talk about it with my colleagues. That is definitely one way to cope with it, to be able to talk about it and not hold it in. Also, I, have made connections with faculty and staff outside of my department who I identify with. So I'm able to build relationships and connections with people outside of my department and feel safe enough to go and talk to them about some experiences I'm having. We kind of, confide in each other about certain things. We may or may not, you know, approach the situation or confront the situation, but if there's an outlet to talk about it and feel less alone, then that is my vote all the way. But I do feel like depending on where you work, there may be people who are less aware, less sensitive, maybe are ignorant, or are very intentional with the things that they say or do. So I just feel like it really depends on where you are. I feel fortunate to be around people who are sensitive and aware and know what microaggressions are and racism and discrimination and social justice, and, you know, have a mentality like I do.
Yeah, that sounds very helpful. Thank you. Dr. Smith, are you able to hear us yet?
Okay, so as a person of color and a social psychologist, I'm pretty sure this is similar to what Dr. Jazz said, even though I couldn't hear her. But I think that, you know, when you go into certain circles, you will be the only person in the room, and oftentimes, you know, all of the things that go along with that. But I think one of the things that was really interesting to me, trying not to repeat some of the things that I'm sure have already been said, is that at the HBCU that I'm currently a professor at, I am the only African American in the psychology department. And so I found that to be really, really interesting. And I think as a professor, both at UA when I was a graduate student and at Tougaloo, when you are one of the only people that look like you within the area, then you will be constantly called upon to serve on different committees, or be a mentor, or to engage in different initiatives. And what I would try to caution people against, and which is, and I say this even though it's hard for me, because these things are great things that people need to be doing and have representation, but you don't want to over exert yourself, or be drained, or be give all of yourself to and not have time or energy to pursue your career in the way that you would want to. And so for me, I find it, you know, you don't want to turn students away, or you don't want to not lend your voice to certain circumstances, but you also have to make sure that you are being respectful of your time. And I know I have a lot of colleagues at Tougaloo who, you know, look back at the early stages of their career, and they would always warn me to be cognizant of, you know, being a part of the community, being helpful, but also making sure that you are pursuing your career in the way that you want to pursue it. And so other than that, I think from trying to read Dr. Jazz's lips, I think she covered everything that I would talk about in terms of being a person of color within this particular arena.
Great, thank you. Dr. Jazz, we wanted to give you both just a few moments to maybe provide any closing remarks you might have.
Yeah, so I would say some things to remember are, you know, have a mentor. I feel like we have to help each other get to where we want to go, and having a mentor is one of the best ways to do that, and also having a mentee. So immediately giving back to people who are coming after you or under you. And the other things that I would say is know what it is you want to do. I should say knowing what it is you want to do doesn't necessarily mean that you have to know exactly how to get there. So it's okay to feel lost or feel like you're on a trajectory that you're unsure that you're going to stay on. I would just stay as focused as possible. The more focused you are, the more clear it will become, regardless of where you are at in your path or journey. To be honest, I'm surprised that I'm seeing clients in a clinical position. I thought I'd be doing something else. But the other thing to remember is whatever job that you accept, it's probably going to have some pros and cons. So it's up to you to decide on what you will and will not tolerate, and what you feel like you need to do, what initiatives you feel like you need to take in order to make it the job that you want. Because no job is perfect. There's always going to be something that is going to annoy you or disappoint you. So then you have to decide on what it is you want to do about that. Do you want to stick with it, or do you want to leave, or do you want to maybe add in some things or do some things differently to where you start to mold it into something that you really love and enjoy? Because our careers are the majority of our lives. So happiness in your career should be a top priority.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Smith, do you have any remarks?
Okay, so for me, I will just say, in the pursuit of the things that you want to do not limit yourself at all, and make sure that you know, even if you're a little unsure about all of the things that you would want to do, or you're like me and you're interested in a little bit of everything, do not be afraid to try and venture out and do things, because that's really how I started to find the things that I really wanted to do and the things that I loved in relation to research and in teaching, and also being able to decide what was the best fit for me with this exploration. So, doing things like coming to Brown or engaging in these fellowships and going around and testing the waters at different types of institutions, to see where the best and where I was the happiest. And I think also making sure that you allow yourself to be mentored by individuals who are, going to provide you with the type of guidance that you need. And sometimes your mentors can be from unexpected places. And so I know I have a lot of mentors that are not psychologists, who may be, researchers that work for NIH or work for the CDC, or are people in positions that I one day would like to be in, even if they don't necessarily do the things that I do. And so just being aware of your environment and the opportunities that come to you in different types of packaging, and being open to those experiences and exploring. And so that's all I'll say. And you can always contact me. If you guys send out an email, you can send out my email address, and that's fine. I'm always willing to answer any follow-up questions that you may have. I can talk all day if you want me to, but I won't. I promise. So that's all I have.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you for joining our webinar today. I think everyone who joined learned a lot. So we would just like to thank you both, and hopefully everyone enjoyed themselves.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.